Hey, everybody, and welcome to the podcast. Today, I have Noel March, and I think a lot of the people listening will maybe already know Noel March, but if you don't, I'm going to introduce him with one of the more impressive bios I think we've seen in public safety. So, Noel, please don't blush, but I'm going to run through who you are so that people listening that haven't met you know who you are. So Noel is a lecturer of justice studies and director of the Maine Community Policing Institute at the University of Maine at Augusta. From 2010 to 2018, he served as an appointee of President Barack Obama as the United States Marshal in Maine, where he represented the U.S. Department of Justice in the protection of federal courts and judges, the investigation and apprehension of federal fugitives, investigation of registered sex offenders, confiscation of criminal assets, and support of the Witness Protection Program. Chief March is a nationally recognized subject matter expert in community-oriented policing, having served on the International Association of Chiefs of Police. We know it as the IACP Board of Directors. He's also an author of an award-winning online police training program, and he instructs and speaks on community engagement topics at colleges and conferences across the world. He has been featured in the Police Chief, Aslet Trainer, the FBI National Academy Associate, and University Business magazines. Noel is a decorated veteran of law enforcement in Connecticut and Maine, where he also served in the ranks of police officer, drug unit supervisor, and chief deputy sheriff. Noel, I also know through the FBI National Academy, where he attended the 170th session, as well as the University of New England and University of Maine Graduate School, where he earned degrees in organizational leadership and peace and reconciliation studies. And I think lastly, and importantly for our conversation today, Noel is also the Chief Strategy Officer of Sigma Tactical Wellness, which is a cardiac education prevention medical firm. And we're going to talk all about how they do what they do later in the podcast. So Noel, welcome to the pod. Thank you for being one of our first guests. And yes, great to see you.
Great. Thank you, Matt. After listening to that embarrassingly long introduction, it reminds me that after all of the jobs that I've done and the things I'm involved with, people ask me, so Noel, what's your retirement plan? And I'll tell you that my retirement plan is to work, obviously. I love the profession. I love having relevance and involvement in anything involved in supporting policing in America. And what we're seeing here now in 2024 is a greater need than ever in so many ways. I'm looking forward to talking about that here with you on this podcast.
Awesome. Thanks, Noel. And I should also add, for transparency, I also know Noel personally as an advisor to Multitude Insights, my other company as well. So with that, I'm going to jump into a couple of questions with Noel. What I wanted to start with today, I mean, you and I know each other pretty well, but despite like the hundreds, maybe thousands of conversations we've had late at night over burritos, whatever it may be, I want to learn a little bit about your time at university law enforcement. This is kind of, I think a little bit of a different beast than municipal policing, right? So talk to us a little bit about like what makes it interesting, what makes it different, a few stories maybe.
Thank you, Matt. For me, it's a very interesting spoke in the wheel of criminal justice, public safety, and law enforcement or policing. Because here in this country, in the United States, we have about 4,200 colleges and universities. And those colleges and universities welcome approximately 1 million new first-year students to their campuses and in their enrollment numbers every year, and they're protected by approximately 30,000 public safety officers. Now, maybe a third of those public safety officers are sworn police officers.
Right.
I mean, the real deal, badges and guns and donuts and all of it. The others have a combination of a proprietary or a employed public safety officer or security officer force, a contingent of professionals, some contract. But the point is that we learned early on, prior to the Virginia Tech tragedy that our campuses, our schools, are unique communities in and of themselves. And I will tell you that had I known earlier in my career, which I began full time as a patrol officer, like
Yeah.
most police leaders, start at the bottom on the midnight shift as rookies, and hopefully, if their careers progress to higher levels of responsibility and leadership, they won't forget the lessons learned as a patrol officer. But had I known earlier, I would have pursued higher education, public safety, and policing.
Yeah.
So many of our campuses are like little cities. And when I think about my time, I've been police chief at a couple of universities, but the University of Maine is where I spent most of my time, beginning in 2002.
Okay.
And I found here's a town, and there's arts, entertainment, residential, food court, shopping. Schools of this size have their own zip code.
And how big is it?
Works. Go ahead.
How big is it?
It's not as big as some, but there are approximately 12,000 students.
Okay. Yeah.
2,500 employees and staff. At any given time, there could be up to 20,000 people on that campus.
Yeah.
And by a whole lot of standards in this country, and certainly here in New England, where I live, that's a good-sized town.
Yeah.
With all the issues that come with a good-sized town, plus the dimension of having these young people be the largest demographic of a residential campus. For the first time, many of them without parental supervision, haven't been given everything in life except discipline, and they're exploring and pushing the envelopes, exploring their new freedoms. And it's a fantastic time in their lives, and it's a fantastic asset, these young people, and all the other work that takes place on a campus, whether it be research or scholarly work and international students and scholars. It makes it very satisfying, very gratifying to be able to make a difference and role model what policing should be for these young people as they go off into their careers and off into their, adult communities where they will live as their adult lives. And it's something that I think is a best kept secret in policing.
In policing.
And often has a bit of an identity crisis.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about that too. Like, I don't know, my only interaction prior to starting Multitude with law enforcement was, running into my campus police. We'll just leave it at that. Once or twice, believe it or not, before I was a naval officer, I had less discipline. But it's like you said, it's like the first time, many quote unquote civilians are going to have interaction with a law enforcement function, like a big component of the government, right? What's that like? Like, how much does it affect how strict the police are, for lack of a better word? Does it affect enforcement standards? Like, how does that come through in the day-to-day policing?
Sure. Well, I have a couple thoughts on that. But first, I want to clarify, maybe even define a little better. While some of our young students this may be their first close interaction with a police officer.
Yeah.
We have many students who come from all over the country, who may come from inner city living and have frequent contact with police or witness contact of police with other residents that may be living in their neighborhoods. And sometimes that interaction is not viewed positively, or maybe there's an old saying, you never have a second chance to make a first impression.
Right.
So we have these new young people, these idealistic and unrealistic, often, young people, that we have the chance to set the tone or reset the experience to show how policing should be in partnership with the public, working on problem solving and prevention efforts together, and to build trust and understanding both of their lives and of the responsibilities of our police officers. So the classroom is where an awful lot of learning takes place during those 4 or 5 years, whatever it takes to begin and hopefully stay and be graduated from your college or university. But I have often said, many of us have, most of the learning during those years takes place outside the classroom.
Yeah.
And if a police officer can be an educator first and an enforcer last because nothing else worked or was appropriate for that moment, then they have performed the role of educator, developer, and hopefully lead by example of how we should be expecting our police to be in partnership in police service to our communities.
Yeah, I think that makes so much sense. And I also think, like, from my own background, having a run in or two with my Gonzaga University campus police, they did, take the time to explain why things were the way they were. And yeah, I think that, like, it was almost like a safe place to fail, right? I guess I think not that I think that could be taken the wrong way, and that could be taken into, oh, we're going to coddle university students, and all the things that jump to mind when you say something like that. But I do think that it's a place to, these are future citizens, voters, and they're all voters too, right? You need to treat them with respect and also educate them about the proper role of law enforcement in the space.
What's unique about this particular type of community, as set apart from the community at large in towns and cities across this country, is that everybody is paying typically good money to be there in that community, or they're being paid good money to be there in that community. What I mean by that, Matt, is they are vested in this place and in this space, in the health, safety, and well-being of their roommates, teammates, classmates.
Yeah.
It's a different vibe and a different purpose. And when a campus police officer suggests that maybe you dump out that red Solo cup, and
Were you there when I was having this run-in, by the way?
I thought I recognized you, Matt. If you can see a profile, maybe I can get a recollection of the mugshot. But dump that Solo cup and meet me at the dean's office 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. And is your dad home tonight?
Yeah. Yeah.
City and town police officers typically don't have those options to suggest that perhaps calibrating your behavior would be in your best interest and in the best interest of, your experience and that of other students. I have seen, oh boy, Matt,
Yep.
my screen just went white.
Let me pause here.
Yep.
So, Noel, we were talking a little bit about like the differences of a campus law enforcement and the opportunity to be educators, right? Any other maybe good stories from your time there on campus of getting an opportunity to educate a constituent, or maybe even relationships you built with students that maybe became friends and colleagues later?
Well, I want to share a couple of things, I guess, in response to that. Sure enough, listen, in the middle of the woods of the state of Maine is where the University of Maine is located. And I mean, they have a great history of Division I hockey and educators and scholars, students from 74, 75 different countries, every state in the union. It's such a rich, really a rich mix. And here we are. Here's a place where I never would have had this experience to be able to, eat pizza with Whoopi Goldberg, play guitar with Jackson Brown, and drive Dan Rather around downtown Bangor looking for a clean shirt because something had happened while he was. So we have arts and entertainment. We have musical performances, comedy, lectures by celebrities and well-known world leaders. And never would I, in my wildest dreams, in virtually any of my other roles, expect that I would have the opportunities that I have had there. And finally, I just want to say, it's really something on graduation day, commencement, and you have a couple thousand graduates, cap and gown, marching down the quad and towards the commencement ceremonies venue,
Right.
to the music of pomp and circumstance, while university police officers are blocking traffic and providing for safety and the security of the event. And to see a student just prior to graduation, break ranks, step from that procession, find an officer, see an officer they know, and with a hug or a high five, say thanks. You know what I mean.
Yeah.
And here it is. Starting this alpha and omega. They start, they arrive, they live, they learn, and hopefully thrive. And I have lost count of the number of times when university police officers have received a handshake or a hug with that expression of gratitude.
Yeah.
You helped me make it through.
Yeah.
And I'm now about to launch into the world.
Yeah.
So I have to tell you that those are some pretty remarkable moments, particularly for a police officer to experience. We hire into this profession applicants, new police officers who, during their interview process, will always answer one of these two answers to the standard question, which is one of many: why do you want to be a police officer?
Right.
The two answers most viewers will probably anticipate or already know what the answers are. And that is because I want to help people, and I want to make a difference. And it's so important for our officers to actually feel that experience of having helped someone,
Yeah.
and having made a difference. And I've just seen that occur more times than on a university campus than I have in the community at large.
Yeah.
So there's a great deal of satisfaction that comes with this very interesting spoke in the wheel of policing.
Such a, like, I don't know, especially me building my company in this space, like it's a place we didn't understand. Like we, did a whole bunch of interviews with local small municipalities, large major metros, fusion centers, federal law enforcement. And, I think it was one of the ones we missed when we did our initial analysis of the industry, even, is campus law enforcement.
That's often the case. I refer to a identity crisis because each year, as I said, 1 million new students are enrolled and enter our higher education institutions, and they don't have the frame of reference of having been there before, and they're not sure. Even parents aren't sure. Are you real cops? Well,
Right.
in some cases, they're security officers with a different set of responsibilities, and so it's a different sort of relationship. But for the police officers that protect colleges and universities, it's a relearning process through this attrition of graduation and new students coming in to educate and orient these new members. About 20% maybe of the community is brand new every year.
Yeah.
And having to have them come to understand that the responsibilities and the relationship is exactly the same. And I'll tell you something else, Matt. It's this. Many will think that, we're gonna go easy, and it's an educational experience and so forth. My philosophy here in this piece of my career has been quite the opposite. To crack down from get-go, right from the beginning. And here's why. When you have underage drinking, behaviors of high risk, no matter what it is, it's parties, it's alcohol, it's potential for sexual assault, almost anything. When you are firm at the beginning of a school year and summonses are issued, in fact, sometimes, if it's bad enough, arrests are made.
Yeah.
Word spreads like wildfire.
Yeah.
The word will spread, oh, geez, they'll give you 3 strikes, don't worry about it. Or word will spread, hey,
Right.
they're serious here. You do not want to violate the law under the roof of this university because we will be held to account. Did you hear about fill in the blank? And it's preventative. Messaging is preventative. And word gets out, that doesn't go here. We can back off and be easier as the weeks and months go on.
It's like parenting, right? I mean, I'm thinking about my 2.5-year-old right now, and it's always easier to start first.
Right.
And pull it back.
And more effective. You can always dial back with great effect.
Yeah.
It is more of a challenge to dial up with as much effect without building resentment and a sense of unfair inequity. So-and-so got a break. Why am I not getting a break? You
Right.
set the standard high from the start, and you'll have a safer community, you'll have procedural justice in play when everybody is treated fairly. And the expectation is well known, and you back it up. You cash the
Right.
checks that you write. You
Yeah.
keep the promises that you make at the very beginning.
I love it. Well, so one of the more interesting, like, kind of dichotomies in your career is that you went from that to the US Marshal Service, right? So you went from like campus law enforcement to a federal, position that I think a lot of people don't even understand what a marshal is, right? They think you're flying around in an airplane with a gun all the time. Can you talk a little bit, like two-part question, like talk a little bit about what the marshals do, and then tell us a little bit about kind of what your role was there.
Right. Well, I'll do that, and I'll also add in how I got there, which
Yeah.
is as surprising to me as it is to almost anyone else. But let me, I'll share that in just a moment. So the United States Marshal Service is the oldest federal law enforcement position in the United States of America. It was enacted into law by the Judiciary Act in September of 1789, signed into law by President George Washington. There were 13 original United States Marshals appointed for what had been the 13 colonies and now are states and territories at that point, as well as the original United States attorneys were appointed simultaneous, as well as United States.
I didn't know that part.
Judges. Yeah. So it's all part of the Judiciary Act. Our district court judges, federal prosecutor, the federal prosecutor for each district, and the United States Marshal for each district. And the roles and responsibilities were quite different, as you can might imagine, 235 years ago, than they are today. And many of those responsibilities were taking the census, posting of new laws that this new Congress were now passing in order to create a country,
Oh,
the
wow.
United States of America. And so the arms and legs of federal legislation and court orders were in the hands of these United States Marshals and the deputy United States Marshals that would be appointed by the United States Marshal. And that is still very similar today, where the mission here, as we're speaking in 2024, is, as you mentioned in my introduction, the investigation and apprehension of federal fugitives, as well as violent state offenders in cooperation and in partnership with state and local authorities. Approximately 130,000 arrests are made by United States Marshals and their deputies each year in this country. Because, of course, today there aren't 13 districts. There are 94
Right.
districts in this country, including Guam and Puerto Rico. And there are some 4,000 plus deputy United States Marshals. These are the career civil service, 25-year criminal investigators
Right.
of the United States Marshal Service. But there is a marshal appointed by the President of the United States to this very day, with the confirmation of the United States Senate, to oversee the work and the mission of the U.S. Marshal Service in their district, supported by and carried out by the career deputy United States Marshals,
Right.
as placed within those districts. So here in the state of Maine, at the federal courthouses in Portland, Maine, and Bangor, Maine, there are deputy United States Marshals serving the needs and the protection of our courts, protecting our courtrooms, our judiciary, our judges, as well as maintaining the safety and the integrity of the courtroom itself. Also, in addition to the fugitive work, the court security work, asset seizure by order of federal judges, seizing assets, maintaining that property, and often, typically, ultimately, auctioning those assets
Yeah.
to raise revenue or to return revenue to victims of crime and restitution for those that have been harmed or damaged in some way. Paying
Wow.
for the cost, the taxpayer cost, paying back some of that taxpayer cost of the investigation that led to the seizure and forfeiture of that property. I mentioned earlier also, or you mentioned earlier, the Adam Walsh Act that was passed to ensure that registered sex offenders in each of our states are in compliance. And the United States Marshal Service has been tasked with helping to support each of the states in their compliance responsibilities. And you'll find that when there are violations of that Adam Walsh Act, which rise to a federal level, that's when the Marshal Service will take the investigation with the United States Attorney's Office and seek prosecution of those offenders. These are all very important responsibilities. The witness protection, or we call it witness security program,
Probably the best known part.
is maybe among the best known parts. And listen, the history here that I just mentioned, going all the way back to George Washington, we're familiar with the names of Witness Protection Program, Wyatt Earp, Virgil Earp, Bat Masterson. These were all United States Marshals,
right?
In real life, over the course of all of these decades, and you have seen John Wayne and Tommy Lee Jones portray United States Marshals on the big screen in the movies. So yes, there's a storied history there enforcing civil rights during the 1960s, and as well as international fugitive apprehension investigation, the Falcon and the Snowman.
Yep.
Enrique Camarena. I'm gonna have to edit that part. And other well-known fugitive individuals that have been brought into custody and hopefully have been able to prevent from further harm and further crime occurring as a result.
Yeah. So you were there 2010 to 2018 as an appointee?
My phone rang at my desk as the police chief and director of public safety for the University of Maine. It was a member of Congress calling me, asking if I would consider having my name put forward for consideration by the Obama White House.
Yeah.
For United States Marshal appointment, which would be a long process, again, as I mentioned, including confirmation by the
confirmation.
United
Yep.
At that time, I was not enrolled in the same party as the President of the United States, and I thought for sure that would be a non-starter deal
Right.
breaker.
Yeah, of course.
But we all know what a brass ring position that is if you can gain such an appointment in our profession in this country. And I was humbled to be told that what is in the individual's resume is more important than who is in the individual's Rolodex.
Yeah.
We don't care who you know. We
I
care
love
what you've
that.
done. And we'd like you to allow us to put your name forward. And that's what happened. And it was a full year of process before I raised my right hand and accepted that badge. But
can we talk a little bit about the confirmation process? Like, I think like a lot of people would be curious, like that's some like deep bureaucratic state workings. Like, what does that look like? And maybe you don't have to give us the full version. I know it's probably painful, but
well, listen, I think that this in our system of checks and balances under our Constitution, that to provide for the advice and the consent of the Senate for federal positions of such high-level public trust is a vetting and a credibility assurance that the public is entitled to.
Yeah.
To absolutely make sure, and listen, there's I suspect that many of the viewers or listeners will agree that virtually all positions of public trust should go through the same level of scrutiny as stewards of public assets, resources, and authority and power, such as a United States Marshal or United States Attorney. So once the White House is satisfied, a very thorough vetting of me as a candidate to make sure there was nothing in my background that others didn't know about. Matt, an FBI agent knocked on the door of my girlfriend from when I was 18 years old to interview her regarding my patriotism, my personal habits. Had I ever engaged in violence?
The classic question during my security clearance interviews was, has he ever advocated for the violent overthrow of the United States of America?
It's an interesting
the answer is
question.
no.
The answer is no, Matt. I'm not surprised by that, but I think there are a number of people that might be surprised at those who could possibly answer yes to that. It's a very difficult, challenging time that we live in today, and which all times within every generation have been difficult and challenging.
Yeah.
But once the Judiciary Committee heard the testimony in support of my nomination, they were satisfied, voted unanimously to send it to the full Senate with a recommendation of ought to confirm. And I was very pleased that there was a unanimous confirmation. To see anyone on Capitol Hill agree to anything unanimously is rare in and of itself. So I'm tickled by that.
Yeah. I mean, I think when we first met, that was one of the things I was most curious about because one, I didn't understand who the Marshals were. And two, I knew that there was some type of Senate confirmation involved. So pretty interesting. Okay, Noel, let's shift gears a little bit. IACP is around the corner. The conference is around the corner in our hometown here of Boston. Well, I should say my hometown.
Sure.
This is the first year multitudes attending, but you've been involved with IACP forever. And at the leadership level, you've been there, it's doing a lot more than just a big conference for vendors like me to show up and try to sell interesting products into the industry. So can you talk a little bit about your time on the board, some successes you had there, things you wish you could have done, you didn't have time to do, and kind of where the organization's going?
The International Association of Chiefs of Police is the predominant law enforcement leadership professional association, nonprofit professional association in the world, with some 34,000 members. I've lost count of the number of countries that are represented among those 34,000 members. But I'm very proud to have been appointed to the board of directors of the IACP and served for 3 years there. The IACP is a policy organization that considers the progress and the priorities of policing, weighs in on those after deliberate consideration with numerous committees that specialize in everything from crime prevention to police physicians to traffic safety and transnational crime. Today, I happen to sit on the organizational safety and wellness section, which is a group of committees. I also enjoy my appointment to the Community Policing Committee, and I have sat on the Victim Services Committee and the Civil and Human Rights Committee in the past. I'm really dedicated to this association because it has the most influence with lawmakers at the federal level, with whoever is sitting in the White House. Their policy advisors typically will consult the IACP when it comes to crime and policing in America. So to be part of the group of 33 that lead that work for the 34,000 members is really for me one of the gems in my career.
Can I ask a question around the I of IACP? Because, on paper, UK law enforcement is quite different than American law enforcement. Singaporean police. We're going to have a member from Singaporean police force on the pod here shortly. Like totally different rule of law system. What's the value in putting those type of people together, if any? I mean, like versus a strictly American policing foundation.
Sure. The international portion of that title, International Association of Chiefs of Police, the association takes very seriously. Yes, it is United States dominant, primarily because of the membership dominance, right? And this conference that takes place annually is always in the United States, and these members fly to us. But I want to say this, there are offices for the International Association of Chiefs of Police in other countries. And there are groups of leaders who meet with and under the auspices of the IACP in numerous countries around the world. So the reach is far and wide. I liken it to the FBI National Academy experience, where some 200 plus police leaders, mostly the United States, but a couple of dozen countries, will send their police leaders from Scotland Yard, from
Yeah.
to every other Western democracy, to our FBI National Academy, and together it's often called the West Point of law enforcement. In your case, we can say it's the Annapolis of law enforcement. But you're invited to attend that FBI National Academy, and you then spend 11 weeks together with leaders from across the globe, and you learn about similar challenges and contrasting priorities, laws, approaches, systems, and processes that benefit all of us. The same is true for the IACP. To be able to share space and time together and not stay in your silo or in your town or in your office, but to reach out, look out, and become better informed, more enlightened, makes for better public safety police leadership globally as well
Yeah.
as here in the United
Yeah.
States.
Yeah. And I think, like, the policy guy in me loves the mission of IACP. Like, I get to read the magazine every month. I get to read the reports, the annual reports on various aspects. As a founder, as an entrepreneur, it's a great way for me to kind of like, I guess, stay in the loop. IACP Tech is huge, right? That's another great conference coming from the technology mindset of like, what's the cool stuff we're doing right now in policing? Like, any favorite like initiatives going on at IACP right now? I don't want to spend a whole bunch of time here, but like, it's a huge organization. There's so much going on.
Following the trends of crime, particularly globally, is one of the strongest suits of the IACP.
Mm-hmm.
And that is human trafficking, fentanyl production just south of this country, immigration issues that may impact criminal justice and interface with criminal justice issues. The unhoused, the homeless, the social disorder challenges to our communities, which can lead to crime, but even more frequently lead to fear of crime among our residents. And that's something that is of equal importance to us as police leaders, to provide for a sense of safety and peace of mind for our residents. Whether it's human rights or police misconduct, use of force, where the image and reputation and credibility of our police services, understand there are over 18,800 police departments in the United States of America. That doesn't include a few thousand sheriff's offices and state police and state patrol organizations, but just at the city and town level. And when there's a hue and cry for, we have to change our system of policing, well, just at the city and town level, that's 18,800 plus systems. They each have their own chief. They each have their own town council or city council, and they each have their own mayor and whoever else is influencing priorities and issues within that jurisdiction. What is a priority in Bangor, Maine, is going to be different than a priority in Biloxi, Mississippi. And to have a nationwide system is something we won't see just by the virtue of the fact that our country was developed on local control.
Yeah.
It's not like our neighbors to the north in Canada with a 17,000 member Royal Canadian Mounted Police with a statewide police jurisdiction authority, uniformed police officers and marked cars. It's a different, and a national criminal code. We have 50 states, each with their own sets of statutes, many of them similar, all tested by Supreme Court judicial review to be applied the same way. But no two state is truly identical in how they approach their statutes and penal codes.
Yeah.
So we have a melting pot and a mosaic of policing in this country.
Perfect. Okay. IACP, check. I think that's an awesome discussion. I want to talk a little bit more about now, like your role at Sigma. So, I think maybe even 5 years ago, people would have looked at something like what Sigma was doing and been like, I don't know. I don't get it. So tell us what Sigma is,
Sure.
but then let's talk about how you guys are building there. You're the chief strategy officer at Sigma Tactical Wellness, right? I want to tell us what it is, and then let's get into some nuts and bolts of like what's working to build Sigma, right? There's a lot of entrepreneurs and kind of startup-y type folks in public safety that are going to listen to this. What are you guys doing, and what are you doing right?
Thank you, Matt. So I spent 40 years behind a badge, beginning as a patrol officer and ending as a United States Marshal. I've worked in local, county, state, and federal law enforcement all during that time. I like to say that for 40 years I was a player. Now I'm a coach. As you mentioned earlier, I have a faculty appointment in community policing and justice studies here at the University of Maine at Augusta. But also, I am supporting our profession. And I love this profession dearly. After all that time, I am not cynical. I am not pessimistic. I am not burnt out. I think that policing is among the most noble of professions that we have in our free and fair democracy. And moving on to the topic at hand here is our concern that rose over these past few years around cardiac health in police officers. Now, there's some 700, 800,000 law enforcement officers in this country. I don't know the number exactly because we have so many vacancies at the moment, because we have a recruitment and retention challenge that we have not seen in my professional lifetime. But we have a cardiac health issue. See, it was about 5 years ago that we were really stunned in our profession to learn that suicide was the number one cause of death in law enforcement. We hadn't known that number before because we typically, traditionally, had counted the number of on-duty police job-related deaths while you're on the clock.
Right.
Well, very few of those suicides would take place on duty. They were off duty or they were within 60 months, 5 years of retirement. We did the same overlay then with heart attack deaths because we knew there was a lot of those deaths. Not even the heart attack you survive, but the one you die from.
Right.
And sure enough, on duty, off duty, and within 5 years of retirement, that number is higher than suicide. Heart attack death is the number one cause of death of law enforcement officers in this country. That is statistically cited. And I'll add that you're 25 times more likely to die of a heart attack or I should say have a heart attack as a police officer than you are to be shot as a police officer.
It's an insane statistic, right? Like when you told me that for the first time, my jaw dropped.
Right. Well, we can include citations for these statements as well for the listeners. But even the statistic that is as shocking to me is that a law enforcement officer in the United States has a life expectancy of 22 years less than a non-law enforcement officer, civilian,
wild
in public. And but the good news is it's preventable. In almost every case, in majority of these cases, it's preventable. But what's happening and what had been happening, and I'm going to talk about this role that I happily hold for Sigma Tactical Wellness. What's been happening is that you go to your family doctor, and your family doctor, as good as they are, like mine is, just isn't testing first responders and public safety officials for the markers and the indicators of early onset coronary disease. We're being examined like any other John and Jane Q public member with your calcium, not your calcium, your cholesterol score and your body mass and so forth. But what's happening here is the rotating shifts, the sleep deprivation, the poor diet of
you're on the road. You're on the road.
And listen, being a police officer is a very boring job until it's not.
Right.
You go from 0 to 60. You may have heard this, that being a fighter pilot is 98% boredom and 2% sheer terror.
Yeah.
And you do that enough times, particularly when you're sedentary, maybe you don't have great coping skills. We see a lot of trauma and We can never seem to shake the hypervigilance, nor should we, as we're always tactically ready. And I'll tell you this, Matt, we're always tactically ready on our days off.
Yeah.
When we're picking the booth in the corner or back to the wall, we're often carrying a gun in our waistband. Even when we're out with our families and they're looking at the special of the day or whatever else might be, or what they want to play on the jukebox, we're watching the front door and the cash register and seeing if there's another egress out of that restaurant in the event of violence to erupt. So we have this lifestyle that is visited upon us by virtue of the job that wears us down physically. Sigma Tactical Wellness was founded by Dr. Benjamin Stone, PhD, and Dr. Jonathan Scheinberg, board-certified cardiologist, to focus upon the coronary screening needs of police officers and other public safety first responders. You see, when you go to your family doctor, as good as they are, the standard for reimbursement for coronary cardiology screening and testing won't be reimbursed unless you have chest pains. Medical necessity. But if you're not presenting, if you're asymptomatic, not presenting those symptoms, your doctor will never know if you are building up plaque, if your arteries are becoming inflamed and getting worse and worse along the way. And that's where this company has come in. Sigma Tactical Wellness has screened just over 15,000 police officers and some other first responders in this country, and have found nearly half, as young as their late 20s and certainly early 30s, otherwise seemingly fit men and women in uniform with early onset coronary disease that is reversible. Sometimes it's a $5 statin you need. Sometimes it's making changes at the dinner table, more walking, less whiskey, whatever it might be that helps you compensate for the adversity of the profession and how it affects us. We invest in Kevlar, Matt. We invest in bullet-resistant vests to protect us on the outside. I could not be more passionate about the importance of coronary cardio-metabolic screenings for police officers early to protect us on the inside.
I mean, Noel, this is blowing up. Not even just in law enforcement. Dr. Peter Attia has released his book that's talking about people getting kind of continuous glucose monitoring of their own blood or quarterly blood tests with their local doctor. I mean, it sounds like what Dr. Ben Stone, yourself, and the team have done is basically said, hey, like, let's apply those learnings to these men and women in uniform. It sounds like maybe there's like a policy unlock here too, wherein because the agency is sponsoring it, there's a way to get it paid for too. Can you go into a little more like nuts and bolts about like what, because there's a business unlock here that hasn't been done before too. It's not like it's a healthcare innovation. I get that, but it's also like for the entrepreneurs in the audience, like it's also kind of like a policy unlock too that enabled business success. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. One of the biggest challenges has been who's going to pay for this?
Yeah.
And that's a question that police unions are now asking. And risk managers and risk pools, workers' comp underwriters as well, are asking the right questions. Should not this be paid for? This is something that, listen, we put more money into maintaining the performance of our police cars than we do in the performance of our police officers in terms of our operating readiness, fitness for duty, ready for the road.
Yeah.
And there are a number of options that are beginning to present themselves. Where I live here in Maine, our legislators have passed a fund of $2 million to reimburse for mental health check-ins and cardio-metabolic screenings for police, firefighters, corrections, and 911 operators. This is groundbreaking. This is new. There are a couple of states where, in Massachusetts, there are a couple of insurance underwriters who have seen that, yes, this is altruistic, but more than that, it's actuarial. You see, a heart attack, according to the Commission for the Accreditation of Law Enforcement Agencies, CALIA, they have listed among their standards that and supporting documentation that a heart attack, whether you live or die, in law enforcement will cost the employer $450,000 to $700,000.
Right.
Well, you can screen an awful lot for prevention of
no brainer.
It's a no-brainer. But like everything else in government, it's a slow bureaucracy to get the enlightenment and get the understanding. But Colorado, there's a workers' comp underwriting group there that is funding screenings in Colorado. So we're starting to see. So Massachusetts, there's some underwriters. Maine, the state government is funding it as a test.
Yep.
And we will be providing, when I say we, I am also the Chief Strategy Officer for Sigma Tactical Wellness, as you mentioned. We're going to be providing the data back to the Capitol, back to the governor's office to show what we're finding. I want to give you one example. It was not long after January 6th that the U.S. Capitol Police asked our doctors to come do a screening voluntarily for anyone that wanted to in that U.S. Capitol Police agency to go through screening. And sure, I mean, we had young, old, black, white, male, female, rank and file, a real cross-section sign up for that. And we found that 57% of those officers, 57%, had undetected coronary disease. And that didn't just happen from the event of January 6th. It happens gradually over a period of time. And that is really an example. That's not an aberration. An example of what we're finding in this profession. In Central Texas, 80% of law enforcement officers are clinically obese.
Right.
There are a number of factors that are contributing to this issue, this crisis. And if we're interested in recruitment and retention, we've got to be interested in the health, safety, and well-being of our police officers in this way.
So, Noel, on that point, like you just talked about West Texas and Washington, D.C. at the same time, like my mind jumps to scale, right? I think about like how multitudes onboarding agencies and like the problems we face with just trying to scale up fast enough. Are you guys, are you guys, using particular technologies, or do you have to knock on every door of every agency and say, hey, we have this capability? Like, how are you like using technology, I guess, to enable like service delivery to all these agencies?
In the evolution of our company, Sigma Tactical Wellness, we are in that stage right now. I mentioned that we have screened just over 15,000 patients so far out of a market universe of about 2 million. So you can see we just have so far scratched the surface. And to scale this process and this company in a way that reaches more of my fellow law enforcement officers and other first responders is going to require technology and a business development strategy that starts with awareness. So we have spent the past few years, matter of fact, nearly 50 presentations this year alone will be made.
I think I've been to a couple.
By Dr. Stone, right. And you will see it again at IACP in Boston on the 20th of October. Dr. Scheinberg, Dr. Violanti, and others are providing panel discussions at IACP on this very topic. So this is really, fortunately, this is becoming more and more aware. The awareness.
People know about this now. Yeah.
Right. And it'll be asked for and needed in a way that it would not have been, hasn't been before, because it wasn't known. And this really needs to be the sort of the next thing. Fortunately, we have invested an awful lot of effort, fortunately, and technology and time into the issues of stress from the neck up.
Yeah.
Critical incident stress debriefings, post-trauma, and the like. Now, the neck down, because it's all connected, Matt. Our stress in our mind directly impacts the stress in our body. Yeah. And it has to be a holistic approach to preparedness, readiness, and health. And listen, you work a whole career in this profession, you want to collect more than a year and a half's worth of pension checks before you're suddenly checking out. Right. We want to get as many as possible for as long as possible and enjoy that life we always looked forward to and take care of the families that we love so much. So
I think it's great. So I'm a builder. Building companies is interesting to me. Raising rounds of financing and things like that is always hard in public safety. You have to kind of get over the hump of like explaining to an investor like what the outcome is, define the market, who's going to buy this. Okay, the user isn't the economic buyer, like all these things. You talked a little bit about that, but in terms of like the market for Sigma, who's going to pay, you guys have, it sounds like a huge policy wing of your business development. I guess to put it more accurately, like a big part of your business development is petitioning government to set aside funds, insurance to set aside funds. But how did you initially fund the company? Like, is this venture backed? Is it invested by, is it bootstrapped and you guys have just built it slow and had success, or how do you do it?
In our case, completely bootstrapped. And it's we're very proud of that, our progress has been slow, deliberate, and successful. The growth will come from the sort of the tipping point change in the understanding of the priority and the need, the critical need of this. But I want to say that the funding streams have been numerous. In some cases, we have a city that's using COVID relief money to pay for this for their officers.
Sure.
Another city that has a number of vacancies have taken the saved personnel, the
headcount budget,
to redirect to this.
Yeah.
It's in another community, another town, asset forfeiture money that is on the books is being used for this. And in some larger cities, a partnership between the police union that sees this as a benefit and sees the benefit of it, partnering with City Hall to share the cost, and sometimes share the cost even with the officer, so everybody has some skin in that game.
Yeah.
And what we're finding when the police associations and unions are involved, they appreciate it so much that they are now negotiating that into their agreement for the future year or 2 or 3 ahead. And that's what we need to see. But we have seen that the expectation is that every officer will have a bullet-resistant vest. Every officer is going to be provided with a firearm, all the tools that they need to do this job and to do it safely. We're investing in the officer's safety with vehicles with airbags and traffic vests and tourniquet equipment and so forth. So it's not unusual for us to pay the tab to make sure our officers are safe and healthy and stay that way as possible. Yeah. This is yet the next thing that's been overlooked for too long that we are anticipating will be standard in what we provide for our police officers.
I think it's just a cool business model because, I'm thinking of my own business as SaaS business, right? We were working to find different pots of money and then building in all the classic SaaS metrics that we go after. You guys are a business, a technology-enabled business with a policy ground game that has to be like on point to be successful, which is not always the case in law enforcement. Yet we are both quilting together sources of funding, right, to make it happen because of the 18,800 agencies, as you put it. It's there's probably the saying I kind of have is like, there's 18,000 agencies out there and 10,000 ways of doing things. Like there's a little overlap,
right,
but not a ton. So,
another powerful aspect of our profession is peer-to-peer reference and peer-to-peer referral.
Yeah, word of mouth.
Word of mouth, and when a new approach or new technology or new process is being recommended, one of the first questions that we are asked, and I know you are at Multitude Insights in your other business, is who else is doing it?
Who else is using it? Yeah.
And what's their phone number?
Yeah.
And or if you don't provide that, they're going to find it and they're going to make that call. You and I did that at the same time. Make that call and say, are these guys for real? Is this worth it? And what has your experience been? And that, that just geometrically explodes in terms of, will you become a household, if you will, household name?
Yeah.
Like we know the names Motorola and Axon and some of these others that are just ubiquitous within the profession.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I've one other section I want to hit because I know we're getting close on time, but I'm going to be a little selfish and talk about your advisory to Multitude, to my business. You've been an advisor, gosh, I think almost going on 3 years now, almost 3 years.
Going on 3 years, Matt.
Which, by the way, we've been in business since 2022, and I'm sitting here in October of 2024. So for a minute, let's put it that way. You know, we met in Harvard Square at Felipe's over burritos, and I pitched you this concept of information sharing dominance, taking even small agencies in West Texas, to borrow your example, and making them able to be information sharing powerhouses, helping solve crime faster, but I know somebody in your position gets pitched cool ideas about law enforcement all the time. Can you tell me a little bit about, like, why did you decide to come on as our advisor? Like, what was it? Merit? Was it the idea? I'm not looking for high fives, but I'm just curious, like, what made you decide to do this at your stage of your career?
Well, there are two things, and I bet that police leaders who are listening to this will agree with this. One, I heard you guys were legit. Again, there's that peer-to-peer, referral network.
Yeah, it's so strong in this industry.
It's so strong.
Yeah.
That's number one. But number two, the over-the-horizon innovation. Because there are a lot of people out there selling software. Many of them are pretty much look-alike, or it's been done and we're doing it for less money, or ours is better for whatever reason. But the futurist vision of breaking down those silos of information, where sharing of data is the foundation of analysis and crime solving and suspect and clue identification and connection. The way that the Multitude Insights model approaches that is novel and ahead of the curve. And that's what interested me most. It's been a pleasure, really, and of great interest to me, if I've been able to offer you any advice and the company in the role that I have as your occasional advisor to the profession and to the landscape of policing in the United States. I'm happy to have done that. But I want to say that I'm mostly proud of the work that the people of Multitude Insights have done and the developments. It is not the same company that it was 2.5, almost 3 years ago when I first agreed to join you for a sort of a trial run of how is this going to look, how is this going to work. But when you see fusion centers signing on, major police departments in this country signing on, and recognizing the value of those other data intelligence, information, and records management systems being able to be not just integrated, but also to be able to be scrubbed, scoured, and assessed for the linkages. And the thing that we know, no matter how long you've been in this profession, is that criminals do not respect the town line. And crime is transient. And what we don't know in my town, which is known in that city, but it's the same offense and our citizens are at risk of the same offenders, but if that could be intercepted and a investigative intervention is possible by sharing information, sharing bulletin, sharing data, such that every patrol officer has access to nearly real-time information to make good decisions. You need good information to make good decisions and to figure out where you need to be and when. In fact, that's part of community policing, knowing where your hotspots are, who your frequent flyer offenders are, and what are the trends that are occurring, and we can connect the dots. And if we can solve crime and save time, which is something I say quite frequently to you, then that's building a better mousetrap. That matters to us. That works, particularly with the diminished resources we have, personnel and staff. If we have a detective going through file cards and paper records, or even doing Google searches and database searches, or just talking to detectives from other jurisdictions, it will take forever, and we will miss most of what the technology that Multitude Insights has brought to bear. We'll miss, and that's what's exciting.
I promise I didn't pay him to say any of that. Thank you for the kind words. I definitely think, like, we're trying to build, like, it might be a step too far, but like almost cultural technology for law enforcement, meaning like we want the culture to be about sharing, not in my jurisdiction, pal mindset. Right. And I think why we sought you out for advisory, we being my co-founder and I, is because we saw you as one of the culture carriers in the industry, right? Like one of these guys that had, like you said, gone from patrol to US Marshal. I think that we were attracted to that because we needed somebody that had seen all the sides, shapes, colors of law enforcement to help us understand. So thank you, Noel, for the advisory and the also being my conference Sherpa from time to time as well. Like, I think we've done that a couple of times now. So in closing, I have a question that is going to kind of become my closing question here. And it's because I'm having so much fun building this company. And you don't need to answer this with a purely professional mindset. So my closing question is, what is the most pure, unadulterated fun that you've experienced recently?
Gosh, I knew you'd ask something like this, Matt, and I think sometimes the answer to a question like that might be embarrassing, but...
Good, even better.
Oh, gosh, I think that the most unadulterated fun... I live up here in Maine. And Maine has 350 miles of coastline. And I played tourist for the first time in many, many years. My dear wife and I had a day off together, and we drove to Bar Harbor, Maine. And with an idea, we're going to get a lobster. But what we did for unadulterated fun, and maybe some will find this interesting, most probably won't. We took a whale watch boat out to the shores off of Canada.
Yeah.
And we found ourselves in the middle of a pod of 10 humpback whales with their calves, with their babies, all around our boat. We couldn't even see shore. We were so far out. And I just have to tell you, the excitement of seeing that scene, which most people in this country won't and don't, but to be out there in nature on the beautiful ocean off the coast of this beautiful country, and to be with my wife of 20 years in that place, in that time. Well, I tell you what, we have, the old saying, stop and smell the roses. I encourage every listener here to be a tourist every now and then.
Yeah.
And set down that phone, step out of that office or out of your home, and go see this place. The United States of America is gorgeous, and it has more to offer us than I think any of us will probably even begin to imagine. But go do it and enjoy that time, particularly with someone you love.
Hey everybody, Matt White here. I'm the co-founder and CEO of a company called Multitude Insights, and that's kind of my primary day job. But I started this podcast because I wanted to have conversations with the people that I found interesting. So that means the people on the front lines in law enforcement. It means the investors investing in companies, building in public safety. It means leadership and all the people that kind of make this thing work, right? So if you enjoyed this conversation and you want to see more like it, please hit the subscribe button, the like button, the follow button, whatever it might be on whatever platform you're viewing this on. And I'd love to have you along for the journey. Talk to you soon.